Welcome everyone. So my name is Roy Hassan. I'm the head of product at Upsolver. This session is really about learning. And I think one of the things that's exciting about this particular session is that we have a little bit of a different format. I'll pass it on to Alon to introduce himself and the product, and then we'll kind of jump right in, get into some of the problems that he was facing building this product, how we use Upsolver to solve those problems, and actually get on a whiteboard and actually draw some diagrams and show you guys how Alon built the architecture and what technology he used. All right, Alon, you want to take it over?
Yeah. So my name is Alon Horowitz. I co-founded a company called Meta Networks about 6 years ago with Itai Bogner and Shmulik Latdani. We got acquired about 3 years ago by Proofpoint, which some of you might know. And I'm working at Proofpoint since then. Basically, I was the VP R&D in Meta Networks, and I'm basically doing the same role for a bigger group in Proofpoint. Okay, that's me. Roy, you want to go over the agenda?
Yep. So like I said, this is going to be a bit more of an interactive kind of experience. I am going to start with one slide. So I promise there's going to be maybe one or two slides, one at the beginning, one at the end. So I wanted to kind of introduce you to what Upsolver is, and then we're going to switch over to Alon, is going to start walking us through his story and his journey. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly, and then we'll do that. So the thing I wanted to really capture here is that, and we'll talk a lot in more detail, kind of how Upsolver is being used by Proofpoint. But at a high level, Upsolver is really a fundamentally new approach to solving data pipeline challenges. And what we've seen in the market, and you hear this in the story today, is that when you're trying to use your data for delivering business value, and it's not just analytics, right? That's a big part of it, reports, dashboards, those kind of things. But also, how do you take the data, process it, and actually bring it into your application so your users can benefit from that data? Graph visualizations, be able to search through logs. And you'll see a lot of that in Alon's story. The way that we solve the problem is by using a tool like Upsolver. Rather than going and saying, I'm going to go build pipelines using Spark or some of the other solutions, you want to be able to build a solution in a way that is easily digestible, but whichever user is building it, maybe it's a data engineer, maybe it's a software engineer working on the application, they don't have the Spark experience, they don't have the data engineering experience. How do you make it easy for them to take data from any number of sources, transform it in a way they need, and then load it into a target, a destination that they can consume? And it's really about kind of three key things. The first one is about making the developer experience easy. And the way Upsolver does it is by focusing on SQL. Everybody understands SQL. It's easy to define your business logic transformations in SQL, give you the ability to just simply write your SQL code, and then everything else behind the scenes is managed for you. And that's the second big point that I want you to take away from this, is that Upsolver manages the data pipeline operations aspect completely by itself and automated. So whatever you need to do to optimize the data, to partition the data, to structure it, to discover the schema, to evolve the schema over time, everything is managed for you by Upsolver automatically. So it's something that you don't really have to think about as a user. And it's especially important if you're not a data user and you don't understand these best practices and these ideas, you don't need to think about it. So that's the second really big key, is automation of the data pipeline management. And then the last piece of it, or the third piece of it, is how do we provide this solution in a way that's scalable, but also cost effective, so that maybe data processing is not the core, your core business and the core focus of your business, but it's a core component of delivering value within your business. So you want to be able to do it in a reliable, consistent, but also cost effective way. So Upsolver runs on top of AWS, EC2 and S3. Very little footprint from an infrastructure perspective. It's easier to manage. And then the results of that data, whether it's metadata and actually physical data, is all stored in open file formats that is easy for you to integrate with the rest of your environment. And also, if you wanted to take that data and do something else with it, it's not locked into a particular technology, right? So those are kind of the big key things that I want you to kind of remember as we walk through the rest of the webinar, as Alon is talking through the challenges that he was facing, how he approached solving those problems, the team that he had to work on those problems, and then how Upsolver was able to address them. So I'll stop here. I'll let Alon kind of take over from here. Kind of walk us through your journey. Talk to us about, what is Proofpoint. Maybe you can kind of get on a console and show us a couple screens. I think will be really great to understand kind of what are the challenges you faced, and then let's get into the details of the technology, how you solve the problem. So I'm looking forward to the whiteboarding part of this conversation. Okay, so over to you, Alon.
Yeah. So first, I'll start basically by explaining what we actually did. So what we're doing is basically a zero trust product, which give you access to all your intranet resources from everywhere in the world. Basically, we distribute POPs, or points of presence, in many locations in the world, which create a mesh network. And basically, it allows you to connect your resources from everywhere. It doesn't really matter whether you're in the office or abroad. Basically, you get sort of a flat network. And that's what we did. And maybe I'll start sharing it, because I want to show you how the screen looks like, how the dashboard looks like. 1 second. So this is really one screenshot from our dashboard. As you can see, we collect a lot of data, a lot of metrics. As you can see on the right side, on the top right side, basically we see how many users are connected to each POP, to each country. We see the active users across months. We have a lot of traffic, a lot of information about throughput, about users, top users, meaning the users that create the most traffic in the organization. And not just that, because we get a lot of events, we get a lot of information about all DNS queries that are being done on our platform, and sessions and things like that. You can actually see people going to Jenkins and things like that. So this is basically the product that we offer, a safe way to connect to the customer resources. So when we started about 6 years ago, we already had a lot of information which we collected. We already had the POPs, we already had all the DNS queries, already had all the sessions, every TCP connection, all the dumps. And we had a lot of type of information, and we knew it was valuable for our customers. We knew we want to do something with it. We just didn't know what exactly. And this is basically what got me thinking about what kind of solution do I want for our solution. We were only 5 people at the time, about 5.5 years ago. And we didn't have too much developers to spend on a big data solution at the time, because we were mostly focused on networking and security and things like that, right? And I wanted a solution that won't limit me in the amount of data that I want. So shortly, I arrived to basically what I want is a data lake, meaning I don't want to size my information and to create like a data warehousing solution that requires you to size the amount of data that you want, the amount of CPU to read it. I didn't know anything at the time. I just wanted to keep everything in an efficient way and to store everything. And I think this is about the time that I met Ori, the CEO of Upsolver, because once I got to the keyword, the data lake, this is when Upsolver came up, right? So basically, Ori offered me a solution that will allow me basically to store everything in the data lake, which basically will process for me, and they will keep everything in a very efficient format, in Parquet format, in Snappy, compress everything. And I didn't need to spend too much time or effort or big data knowledge to run it. So the only concern at the time was, what if I want, for example, I don't know, not to keep an information, I want to leave, but it wasn't really an issue for me, because the format is a standard format. So if, for example, something doesn't play as I thought it was, I can actually leave at any point in time. So I said, why not? I'll put a single developer and see how everything goes. And I think around 3 weeks later, we already had a running baked data solution.
Sorry, Elon, one question. The developer that you put on the project initially, Was that a data engineer? Was this an application
No.
developer?
It
What
was
experience
just
did
a
he have?
very talented engineer, but he didn't have really knowledge in. Actually, it came from storage, I have to say,
Okay.
and he didn't actually have any prior knowledge in big data per se. And he started playing with the system with your help. And after 3 weeks, we already have a running data lake. Basically, when you think about it, it's a lot of types of aggregation on top of data that we collect from Upsolver, which is pretty cool. Basically, we stream from all our POPs a lot of information, which is pretty raw, and we stream a lot of information coming from a management plane, and we mix it all together, enrich it, and then we get to a more valuable information, which we can then deliver to our customers in an efficient way. That's the high level of what we did at the time.
So all these graphs that we're seeing, these are all driven from raw data coming in from your point of presence systems, right? Collecting raw events, then you're processing them through Upsolver, pushing them to some serving layer, right?
Exactly. And this is where I think I'll show maybe the whiteboard, which we talked about, because maybe this is the time maybe to deep dive a little of how we actually did it.
Can you talk about some of the challenges that you face in actually serving these dashboards? I think this is a common question that we get from a lot of our customers, that they have a lot of raw data and they want to be a data-driven company and they want to deliver some of that data value to their users, but they struggle to get that data, to their dashboards, right? To their applications. So maybe we can kind of talk about some of the challenges you faced in doing this.
Yeah, so definitely. So because the deformation is coming, wait, maybe I'll show the diagram because it will explain it better, I think. So basically, this is how the product looks like. Basically, it has a management layer on the top, right, with a lot of microservices in a VPC in Amazon. And on the downside, basically, you see POP, point of presence, in many locations. And basically, we have information coming both from POPs from all around the world, and you have information coming actually from the microservices themselves, like, attempts for authentication, API calls, things like that. And all the personal information is actually kept in the management plane, and the information coming from the POPs is pretty low level, meaning you see IPs, you see host names, but you don't see really information about the person. So one of the challenges that we ran into is how you take all this information, enrich it in a way that makes it more verbose, meaning more valuable for a customer. We want like lines that are very, very significant to the customers, meaning I didn't want to write things like IP, this and that, got access to Jenkins. I want to write Roy got access to Jenkins, and he didn't get access to Travis because he lacks policy or something like that. This is the language that I wanted to deliver to the customers, right? And this was a challenge because it's coming from a lot of POPs, from a lot of location. It's a lot of information. You can imagine that when you browse, you get a lot of TCP connections and a lot of traffic, and it generates a lot of events. And it's even hard to size it at the time because you don't really know how much traffic to expect when you start, right? So the challenge was both scale and the different streams with different types of schemes and information which we want to mix together. Make sense, Roy?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think this is good, good insight. I think it'll be good to kind of understand a little bit about the type of data that you have. I think you kind of alluded to the volume, but I think it'll be interesting to understand like the type of data. Is it structured? Is it nested? Is it not? Like what
So
is
actually
it we're working with? Yeah.
Yeah, so we try to keep it everything semi-structured, meaning most of it we try to make it flat as possible in JSON format, but you don't have, some events have more fields and other fields than others. For example, a DNS event has completely different fields and information than, for example, a connect event or authentication event or a disconnect event, or for example, a security event that telling me that a customer tried to access a policy that he shouldn't. So a lot of type of events and some add things that others didn't. So I would call it semi-structured, right?
Right.
And we didn't want to actually commit on a structure because we kept adding fields as we moved along, right? So yeah, this is one of the issues that we ran into. And what we did, I started drawing it basically on this whiteboard, is basically we added a kinesis stream. Wait, it's not in the middle. Great. We added a kinesis stream, actually multiple kinesis streams, but for the sake of discussion, a kinesis stream. And we started sending traffic from all our POPs to the kinesis stream. Imagine all the POPs sending information to there, and not just from the POPs, also from our microservices. And then we basically used Upsolver right here to take all those streams and basically enrich them together and make something more valuable out of them. And the first thing we did, which was the story that I just told, which is created a simple data lake on top of S3, write it right here, in a Parquet format. And we just started with basically offering a simple reports to our user, meaning we ran queries, and then we aggregated information, gave them like an email saying, hey, you in the last month, you had this and that users, which did this and that traffic, and so on and so forth. This was like the basic use case that we got after 3 weeks.
So the data that, sorry, the data that Upsolver wrote into S3 into your data lake was, in that case, it was pretty much ready to go, right? It was Parquet format, it was partitioned.
Definitely.
It's not like you have to do any extra work to make it queryable, right?
No, it was completely ready. Actually, you can even see it today. Basically, let me look at, let's take a look at this event, for example. So if you see, you can already see the source like Dana Rubin and Jenkins, all those names are basically the results of the enrichment coming from Upsolver. You actually see names, you see human names, you see name of services. You don't see, we kept the IP in the details from, because it's important. If you want to dig in, you can actually click on the lines and you see more information. But it's still something you can read. And that's the beauty, I think. And this is what we actually kept in the Parquet format, in a snapshot. We didn't even, it's basically Athena walked out of the box for us once it reached S3. Right.
Got it. So once you start writing these events coming from your POPs and your microservices into S3 with Upsolver, you're just able to just quickly start running queries against it.
Correct.
And these queries were for, your team to kind of understand the data.
Exactly.
Was there business users building dashboards on top of that? How did you use that data?
At the first, we just started with manual reports or internal, like you said, we investigated the system. We wanted to see how many users are using it. Maybe provide something from the marketing team, because again, we just started. But pretty soon we saw that this information is super valuable for our customers, and we wanted to give our customers an ability to look at all this information, all those logs, in a fast way. And once you talk about fast, Athena is not the right solution to do it, because Athena, every query takes a lot of time and also costs money. So we wanted a way to allow our customers to do search queries for their information, but to at least for the last, let's say, 4-6 weeks, right? So we added this thing. Basically, we added an Elasticsearch in our management plane. And we added sort of a T-like architecture, right? Basically, we wrote the same information, but actually Upsolver wrote the same information, both to Elasticsearch and to S3. In S3, we kept everything in long retention, meaning indefinitely. But in Elasticsearch, we only kept for the last, let's say, 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I don't remember how we started. And this allowed us basically to provide a search API. And you can search events until this day in seconds. And this is super valuable for our customers. You get everything in a nice, a nice table, searchable table.
So I just want to repeat this, because I think this is a really, really powerful pattern. We see this commonly with customers who are really, trying to understand, first of all, their data, want to build reports, want to open up the raw data for analytics, or maybe even machine learning in the future, but then want to take the same data and repurpose it in a way that they can embed it into their application. So this is a really powerful model where you can bring the data, all the raw data, into Upsolver, and it's simply two pipelines, right? They take the same source, they write the raw data into S3, ready to query with Athena, and then to take the same data and write into another output, in this case, Elasticsearch, so you can integrate with the application and get, you know, full search and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty cool, pretty neat idea.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a storage guy, and usually you don't have a database that actually know which is a jack of all trades, right? You need to choose what is
Right.
good for. Athena is great, but it's good for, you know, running on big data, right? A lot of information. And if you want something quick and more real time, you have to you got to have something like Elasticsearch or
Right.
something like that. And we are paying for it by the fact that we have the same information twice, but it's worth it. It's worth to keep the information twice, at least for the short term, in order to get a good experience for our customers.
Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Okay, and once we actually add all the information, customers started saying, hey, maybe because we have all the information, maybe provide us a platform for creating alerts. Once you have an Elasticsearch, it's a breather, right? Because you can create, we created like a rule mechanism that allows the customer to create alerts. For example, look for events like, you know, like a security breach event or like a policy violation event. And we basically ran on the Elasticsearch information. We already add like the information about the user, like Dana violated the policy, and we just sent alerts to the customer, like Slack notification, email notification, all on top of this information. This is just derived from this effort, right? And shortly after that, we had all this information. It was like raw events, no, not raw events, actually enriched events. And we wanted to provide metrics because we had all the information, but we wanted some numbers. So one of the cool things in Upsolver that they have like a materials view, which where you can basically take all the logs, you accumulate them into a materials views, right? And then I can query them in real time. So basically it looks like this. Let's say it's a part of Upsolver. It's like I put MV, but it's a materials view. And basically some of the microservices query metrics. And actually the information that you see right here in this diagram, when you think about it, is basically a metric over time accumulated in Upsolver, because you get a lot of TCP events. We accumulated the amount of packets or the payloads. We got numbers, it was separated into buckets, and we get a graph. And we see it all over the place. You see top users. Again, it's a material view that basically calculates summarize the amount of data each user did and basically sort it by the top user, right? The user with the most traffic.
Yeah, I think
And
that's an again another interesting point, that kind of bridges the gap between analytics, data for analytics, and then data for applications, right? So like the first couple of examples you gave, it's taking data, raw data in, let's build reports, let's enable full text search on those logs. But now we're talking about actually building some common business metrics or aggregations with Upsolver, using the Upsolver materialized view and actually exposing them to your application via API, right? So rather than having an API gateway or another database that holds that information, you actually get a materialized view that automatically materializes the data in real time as new data arrives, and it's accessible from your application via API, right? So that's kind of really powerful, right? The same stream of data gets represented in 3 different ways in your example.
Exactly, and if you can see the diagram, it's actually quite accurate, meaning the microservice go directly to the materials view, or another microservice go directly to the Elasticsearch. So basically, the combination of the materials view and the Elasticsearch give us pretty good coverage with all things data, right, in our system. Those are the main use cases that we use, but we ran into one interesting use case that I think it might be interesting to share, which probably some of you or most of you run into, which is GDPR, which is a pain, but you have to handle it. When we handle GDPR, one of the challenges with GDPR is that we wanted a data lake and we keep everything enriched with sensitive information in the data lake, right? Which basically creates a problem. How do you, let's say a customer or organization leaves and you want to delete information? It's not that easy to delete information across a data lake, right? You need to go through a lot of data. So we thought a lot about it, and what we came up with is basically, because we had the tick-like architecture, we decided to basically to keep the information with the sensitive information in Elasticsearch. But in S3, we actually anonymize the information, right? Meaning you only see IDs and things like that in an S3, and you see all the information in Elasticsearch. But as long as the customer is in our system, we still have the mapping in our management plane. So let's say I want to create a report. I only have anonymized information, but I can still cross-ref with the information in the database. But once the customer wants me to delete his information, I don't really need to delete the data. I just basically lose the keys, right? I basically lose the mapping, and basically the information is meaningless. And so instead of basically deleting a data from data lake, I just lose its meaning. And this solve it for us. And basically we use Upsolver to do the T architecture and to basically make sure that one stream is anonymized while the other is not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, this seems like a lot of work, right? There's a few moving parts in here. How big was your team who built this, and kind of what was the skill set, and how long it took them to put all this together?
So actually, if you remember the developer that I told you about that started with FreeWorks, is actually, it's the same developer until this day that still leads mostly alone all this big data effort. I think he only had another developer at one point in time that helped him, but most of it is one person job.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Either,
so
either they
basically
were a
we
really
avoided.
impressive person, which I'm sure they were,
No,
but still.
he is. Basically, it allowed us, it gave him a lot of tools. He is, because like I said, he's a storage guy, so he's not,
Right.
he knows S3, he knows Elasticsearch and all stuff, but he didn't need to go deep dive into things like Spark, things like that. He didn't know, we really wanted to avoid all those gotchas when you write things to S3 and want to read them later in Athena, because I don't know whether people tried it, but sometimes when you play with the scheme, you run into a lot of issues. So we didn't want to worry about it, and basically, Upsolver, it's their problem, not mine.
Right.
And yeah, he still leads the effort until this day.
Yeah, I think that's a really important takeaway, right, for folks on the call, and even for me, right, to have somebody who is not a big data person, who's not a data engineer, doesn't have that experience, to be able to put such a robust and scalable data architecture in place that till this day, right, serves your applications. I think that says a lot about the infrastructure, a lot the way that Upsolver kind of helped you simplify and streamline the process. And that, I see this a lot with other customers too, is you end up building a data pipeline, but the outputs required to go to multiple places. You have to redo your pipelines multiple times because the outputs are different. There's different schemas, things like that, where Upsolver kind of makes it all simple and abstracts away a lot of that complexity. So all you really focus on is that business logic, the transformation you need to do. So I
Actually,
think
you raised an interesting point, because when we moved to GDPR, we already had information 6 years old, right? Or like, let's say 4 years old at the time. One of the cool things is the ability to actually back or play all the information again and basically rewrite it in the new scheme.
right.
So basically, we created a cluster. It worked, like I say, a few days or a week. I don't remember the time. But after that, we basically all had a new data lake with all the information in the new scheme. And we didn't lose information that we started with 6 years ago.
That's pretty impressive. The data replay part tends to come up often in conversations with customers, where like, yeah, we can drop it in, we can start looking at the raw data, the new data coming in, and it's great, but what do we do about the old data? Like, how do we replay it? How do we get it back into the platform? So Upsolver makes that a lot easier, I think, in that context. And it's also in a streaming world, right? Like when we talk about batch data, that's one thing, right? You can just replay the batch data, but what about when your data is sitting inside of Kinesis, right? And that's where the data is, and you want to have to replay some data for whatever reason, right? I think Upsolver makes that quite simple for you as well. It's the same kind of mechanism.
Yeah. Actually, Absolute already made my life a little easier when we got acquired by Proofpoint, because you don't really store the data, you just process it. And that makes things a little easier, security-wise, and
Right.
And it's pretty hard to explain to the company that acquired you why all your sensitive data is kept in a third party. It's hard, and the fact that everything is in our S3 makes it easier.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about the use of materialized views. What kind of transformations do you do inside of Upsolver? And then, how do you interact with the materialized views from your microservices?
Okay, so let's take a scenario for example, right? Let's say we have multiple users connect for multiple POPs, right? And what you really want is the aggregation of an organization, the amount of throughput that an organization did in a point in time, right? So we take a lot of TCP events. Each TCP event basically has its payload and the amount of traffic that went through this session, right? So imagine a lot of events coming from multiple locations. Everything gets run into Kinesis. By the way, this information is only contain IDs, things that are pretty raw, right? So we take all this information to Kinesis, it runs to Upsolver, and then we accumulate everything grouped by the organization ID, right, or the tenant ID, right? And then we basically enrich the information of the tenant with the information coming from the management, which is a different stream, like, for example, the organization name, things like that. And then you get basically a materials view where each key is an organization with the throughput in the last month or so. Basically, usually it's an array of buckets, right? You get like
Right.
an array of each bucket is a point in time or interval in time, which is averaged.
So a couple questions here. I think the first question is, and we probably should have clarified this in the beginning, like, well, what is a POP?
Okay, so POP is a point of presence. When you create a distributed network, you usually want to connect to the closest place to you, right? Imagine that you have resources in the office, right? And you're coming from a different country. So you usually connect to your closest POP. Let's say I'm connecting to the POP in Israel, but the information is, I don't know, in Frankfurt. So I'm going through the closest POP. We route the traffic through the closest POP to the destination. We check all the policies, we audit everything that needs to be audited, and then we pass information to the destination. Let's say Jenkins, for example, in Frankfurt, right? So POP is like when you have a CDN, right? You go to the closest location to you. That's the idea when building a distributed network. And we have POPs in many locations. We have like 100 POPs, right? A very big number.
Got it. Got it. So all those different POPs are sending data. Now, do you have Kinesis in different regions, or is it a single region?
No. So I just wanted to simplify it. What we did actually end up doing is basically created Kinesis in key location. We didn't create Kinesis in each POP because it's too much. We created, I think, Kinesis per continent, not actually 2 per continent or something like that, which run into it's like aggregated, meaning you have multiple Kinesis in multiple locations, which run into another Kinesis stream and then run into Upsolver, right? And this is because we wanted, a lot of DR, the ability to move to another Kinesis if something fails, something like that. And this everything goes before Upsolver, right? So Upsolver just gets, a few Kinesis streams. But on the way, we go through a lot of streams.
And the data coming through Kinesis, this is raw data. There's no aggregated events in there. This is just
nothing.
data.
We just keep it in a flat format, meaning it's a JSON. And without any special information beside IPs, IDs, DNS query resolve things. You can imagine when you write, you handle networking, right? It's pretty low level.
Yeah.
We don't know the user at that time.
Got it. And so you take all these raw events, you then aggregate them inside of Upsolver, and then that available in materialized view. I think there's a question in the chat that asks, do you have when you aggregate the data, do you have a choice of selecting which keys you want to aggregate on? I mean, the Upsolver answer is yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you explored like different types of keys based on aggregations that work for you.
No, we played a lot. But by the way, most of the work was done by the developer that
right,
which became an expert for all those. Basically, Upsolver offers a lot of aggregation functions, right? So it's pretty hard to remember all of them. usually I end up asking whether you support this and that. And usually the answer is yes, or we can support it in no time, which is
Right.
nice. And yeah, we have complete, basically we didn't run into a function that we didn't have right now. And we do a lot of things from parsing IP addresses to grouping by a lot of different keys and compound keys and things like that, everything.
Yeah, got it. So yeah, I think the short answer is yes, right? You can pick
Yeah.
existing keys, you can have a compound keys. There was another question in the chat here. This is obviously a question to you, Alon. What alternative solutions did you look at when comparing Upsolver to other capabilities in the market? What are the
So
primary
actually,
reasons? Yeah, sorry. The second part of that is, what are the primary reasons for settling on Upsolver compared to those alternatives?
So actually the alternative was to me to actually start writing everything with Spark, because usually everything we did so far was writing ourselves or using open source solutions. And we wanted to get into Spark. We didn't have prior knowledge in that. And we wanted a data lake, and we need to dig into what was the right way, to write everything, to keep everything, and to avoid all the things that we might run into in the future. And we love actually buying time, right? If we can pay for someone to take care of that, then we usually did it at this point in time, because we wanted to focus on our key, on our networking, on our security. And I actually saw, if I remember the time, because it was 6 years ago, I saw two solutions. One of them was more like a infra that actually keep the information for us. It's like you imagine like a platform on top of a database or data warehouse solution, where you keep everything on their solution. But I didn't want anything like that. I wanted to control the data lake. I want
Yeah,
just
like
someone
a
to let me
hosted
process
environment,
it.
right?
Yeah, I also invite, and I really wanted to invite that, because let's say I leave them, and then what? I don't have this
Right.
information. I need to export it with S3 with your solution. Basically, I have everything in a standard format, and I basically can, leave at any point in time. Of course, I will have a huge gap on how to process everything, but the information is there. I don't lose data, which was important to me, because I wanted an insurance per se, right?
How do you compare the developer experience between Spark when you looked at it, and then ultimately Upsolver when you looked at it?
Oh, Spark is totally. It's you can't really compare it. It's like it's a product, a SaaS solution, which you don't need to you don't need to think about it too much. With Spark, you need to learn it. It's a great platform, by the way. I don't Spark is great. I don't have anything against it,
Yeah.
but it's a learning curve. You can just start and get the data lake without thinking about it.
Okay.
It's expertise, right?
Yeah. I know. Yeah, exactly. And that's we hear this a lot from customers who are exploring. It's the open source engine. I think Spark is great. I've used it for
Yeah.
years.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to know it, right? You got to know how to develop it. I think the bigger part about it is you got to know how to troubleshoot it, right?
Definitely.
When you start scaling, the volume of data increases. That's when the problems start to happen. And if you don't really
Definitely.
understand the ins and out of Spark, it becomes harder to scale and to make sure your pipelines stay up and running. And I don't think anybody wants to wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning because some pipeline
Yeah.
blew up.
And it's pretty hard to say to size it at the time. But I think I want one developer to run all this information, all this operation on top of Spark and keeping it AJ and things like that. I don't think one developer can do it. I think it will require to build a small team. And when you have a startup like 10 developers or 6 developers at a time, you don't really want to focus on not your main use case, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, especially when you don't have data engineers who
Yeah,
who are
definitely.
versed in it and understand how to do it. Um,
Definitely.
there was one other question in the chat. They're asking if the POP is producing streaming data or batch data.
Actually, what we did, it's interesting. We started with running a FluentD. Not sure whether everyone here knows it. Basically, FluentD it gets all the information. Imagine like a ring buffer,
Yeah.
and basically it creates like a batches of information. And it sends all the information in batches to Kinesis. So the services in the POP don't wait for the information. They just stream it locally, and FluentD takes care of all the heavy lifting. Later, we actually moved to using Vector, which is much more high performance. It's written in Rust. It's great, by the way. I really recommend it. I think it got like 40 times better than Fluentd. But basically, this is the design. We use the same in the microservice. Basically, we have a sidecar which takes care of all the accumulation and then sending everything in batches to Kinesis and taking care of all the retries and all those stuff.
Got it. So it's basically, live event, streaming event data.
Yeah.
Okay. There's another question here, I think from the same gentleman or lady, I don't know, it's anonymous. Were there any capabilities that Upsolver gave you that you hadn't planned for? Things you discovered you could accomplish once the platform was in place? That's a good question.
Actually, I think the most, I think the one that I was so mostly surprised was the thing around the Elasticsearch and actually the GDPR, because we didn't think of GDPR at the time, which is not a good thing to do. By the way, next time I'm going to think about GDPR as I start. But after you have a accumulation of 3 years of data, it becomes a real issue, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we managed to solve it relatively easy was great. And I think the replay capability and the anonymization, the ability to split into streams actually really helped us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've been in a lot of conversations around GDPR where, companies are like, hey, we didn't think about this. We really need to do something about it. If you're starting from scratch today, make sure you think about it. Think about it hard.
Yeah. Lesson for next time is GDPR and SOC 2 immediately as you start.
Yep, I agree completely. But yeah, like I love the use case where, again, it's your T architecture, right? Where you split it up. It's the same kind of data, right? But it's being served in different ways. And that's super, super powerful. Good question of what VPC mean. That's virtual private network. So that's in AWS cloud. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, maybe I jumped a little bit because I assume some prior knowledge in Amazon, but yeah, basically imagine all the top side, basically like a virtual, not virtual, basically a virtual network on top of Amazon where all the microservices are running. And basically the top side is a load balancer that gets all the information, all the REST calls and routes it to microservices. So yeah, it's a very high level diagram. If I needed to deep dive into the solution, it will take more than an hour for sure.
So I don't know if you can answer this or not. So feel free to tell me that not going to answer this. What's the next thing for this data architecture, for this data platform for you? What do you think the next big thing that you want to incorporate that maybe Upsolver will help you, maybe doesn't, right? But what is kind of the next thing on your roadmap?
Actually, what we're already doing right now, I wouldn't say it's a new architecture, but basically we're using the same solution. We did it right there for another because we like it. We are creating a new product for a year now or more, which is a SWG, like a secure web gateway, when we get a lot of information, but this time in layer 7 solution, right? Meaning we get a lot of traffic, like we get a lot of information about where you access OS, URLs, things like that, return codes. It's like layers. It's like the ZTNA solution, but everything is layer 7. And you also have POPs, but it's different POPs. It's not like a full mesh, networking mesh. It's more like you get to the closest POP and it takes care of all the security stuff. But the big data solution part is basically a copy paste from this one. Basically, we did the same thing again, and it worked beautifully for a completely different solution.
Got it. So it's like a web security gateway type of product.
Exactly.
Right. Where the data is application level data, right? Browsing the web and accessing it. So you're kind of replicating the same type of model over there, right? Got it. Okay.
Because when you think about it, basically you get information in a pretty low level, but layer 7 on the POPs, right? You get high level information from your management. You want to mix everything together, and you still want to give a very interesting event to the user in a fast way. So you have your Elasticsearch, and basically everything still stands. So it's not like a new type of architecture around Upsolver, but it's more use cases, and we keep adding them up.
Well, it means that architecture is stable, it's scalable, it works
Yeah,
well, right? And that's really what we
yeah.
want.
Mhm.
Actually, there's one other question, and then I wanted to wrap it up with one other slide. Um, the question is, time and available labor are my organization's biggest friction point. Did you ever
Definitely.
quantify how much time and or labor cost this technology saved you? That's a great question.
Wow. And it's very hard to answer this one because
Yeah,
it's really hard to to estimate what would have happened if I didn't go with this solution and went with all in Spark. But I have to say that after those 3 weeks, adding all those I don't know, designs or architecture around it didn't take that much. We are still talking about a single developer that maintains, and when I'm talking about maintaining it, it doesn't really do anything on his daily job, right? About this, right? He's
right.
working on different tasks. He just takes care that everything plays as it should. He sometimes take care of sizing, meaning he creates more streams. He takes care of the kinesis is working as expected. He monitors stuff, but the stream just work, meaning the pipeline works as expected for like 6 years now,
I
really.
will add that we actually have public quotes from a few of our customers. I think Iron Source being one of them, and a few others that have kind of embarked on a similar path, right? Where they, companies that have data engineers, that have people, they started with Spark. One particular example with I believe it was Iron Source, where they went down the Spark route. They kind of projected a year, and they spent a long time just starting to build it out, and a bunch of people. And eventually they rebuilt everything they built in Spark over a course of a year. They took about a month, and they rebuilt all that stuff in Upsolver. But the true savings both on labor and time are there, and we have on our website some proof points of that. And not sorry to use the company name, but some points of proof that you can go back and read. If you don't mind, Alon, I can steal the screen from you, and then
Of
we
course,
can
of
wrap it
course.
up. So I just wanted to take a couple seconds here and just kind of wrap it up, and remind you of kind of the benefits of using Upsolver. And this has been a really, really awesome conversation. Hopefully folks like the new or the different model that we had, not just slides, but more interactive whiteboarding. We want to do more of that. So the biggest one, and I think the last question here kind of talks to it, right, is a lower barrier to entry. Be able to develop your pipelines in SQL, and then leave all the automation, all the orchestration, all the management to Upsolver is the one thing that if you take away from this conversation, I would like you to take away, is that ease of use. And it's critical, especially for organizations that just don't have data engineers, or maybe they have a few that are really busy. Like, you can actually build an architecture just like Alon showed us without data engineers. And it's a great data platform that's serving a real business at massive scale. So I think that's a testament to the ease of use. Again, being vendor agnostic is great. You hear a lot in the market today, different file formats, different table formats, lake houses, et cetera, et cetera. Those are great, and some of them in the open source. But at the end of the day, your data needs to be in an open format, that if tomorrow you want to go and you want to do something else with it, that tool doesn't allow you to do, you should not be blocked. You should be able to just go do it. Right? If you want to migrate from one cloud to another, or do whatever you want, that data is yours. I don't think anybody want to get into an environment where they have to think about, wow, now I'm locked in. It's going to take me several years and millions of dollars to migrate out of that. So that's an important aspect to remember. And then the last one I'll say is performance. We've seen this over and over again when our customers are comparing Upsolver to tools like Spark. Not just the ease of use of building pipelines, but also the performance, especially when we're talking about stateful operations like aggregations and joins across streams at scale, is really, really hard to do. And if you look at Spark and the way they handle it, it works fine for smaller workloads, but for the larger ones, it starts to fall apart, and then it becomes a management overhead for you. So again, think about the ease of use of developing pipelines, and the simplicity and automation of the operation side of it is really what Upsolver gives you. So with that, I just wanted to go back again and thank Alon for everything. I mean, you've done an awesome job. I know this is a new
Thank you for
format with a
having me.
whiteboard, really made it work. Great. So if you have any questions, go visit the website. There's a QR code here for the Upsolver Slack community. Go in there. I'll be there. Other folks on Upsolver will be there. If you have any questions, want to continue this conversation, would love to do that. But again, I want to thank every one of you. I want to thank Alon especially for taking his time and sharing his story. Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate everything, and we'll hopefully see you soon.